Okay, friends, here we are on another glorious Thursday morning here in northern Utah. We're gonna pick up where we left off the last time in Luke chapter 10. We just to refresh your memory, one of the last things we talked about was the parable of the Good Samaritan. Um, Jesus used that to answer the question about loving God and loving your neighbor. How do I love my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? So he tells that story. And when the expert in the law correctly identified the neighbor as the one who had mercy on the victim of the brutal beating and robbery, even if he was a Samaritan, Jesus's answer was, "Go and do likewise. Go and do the same thing." So Luke follows that up with a passage that introduces us to two sisters. We only read about Mary and Martha here in Luke chapter 10, and again over in John chapter 11, and a couple verses at the beginning of chapter 12. My guess is that if you've been around church for very long, you have heard this exchange between these two sisters and Jesus. Verse 38 says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. All right, so so Jesus has been on the map over there, which is not in the screen. Uh, Jesus has been up in the northern area again, somewhere around the Sea of Galilee. And some of this is a little hard to assemble time wise and geography wise. Um, but I am not going to get wrapped around the axle against about exactly what town and exactly what day and exactly what order. We have seen that he's been up in the northern end of things near the Sea of Galilee. Luke tells us that he is heading to Jerusalem for what appears to be the end, and he's going by way of Bethany. Bethany is right over here, just across the Mount of Olives from Jerusalem. It's like a short day's walk between the two. But it's not clear that Luke has got everything in exactly geographical, chronological order, because he then has Jesus back in other places. I think more what Luke has done here is put together some things that kind of flow together a little bit. Um, so Jesus comes to Bethany, to the home of these two sisters, Mary and Martha, and he is receiving hospitality from them. And maybe that's why it's kind of tucked in here, because we've been talking about hospitality in the last couple of chapters. We've seen about loving your neighbor and having mercy and being kind. Plus, there was a whole deal about when you go to a town and you receive hospitality, stay there until it's time to go. So um, that's what makes sense to me. My chronological study Bible here, when it looks at this exchange between Martha and Jesus, I don't know if they're right or wrong, but the editors of this study Bible put a really big emphasis on the fact that Martha is fulfilling traditional female roles in offering hospitality and serving. But Mary is fulfilling a role that is more consistent with a male disciple. And their point is that Jesus is not going to put up with traditional stereotypical gender roles. He's always, moving beyond that. And that may be the case, kind of, but I don't think that's the whole point. That's not the whole point of this exchange. I don't think that Jesus needs to be seen as a gender stereotype breaker. But when we look at the account in the text, it seems like there are two main descriptors of these ladies. Okay, what does it say about Mary? How's she described? Okay, and listening. Okay, she sits at his feet and is listening. Martha, the description about her is that she is distracted by all the preparations. And I really kind of feel like the comment that Jesus makes towards the end of this is really the most important and the most telling thing. Only one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen what's better. Mary has chosen to sit down beside Jesus's feet as a student listening to a master teacher. I sort of have this image of Jesus sitting on a bench or sitting up against a tree or sitting on a short wall in the garden or something, and he's sitting there talking, and Mary and probably the rest of the disciples are just sitting cross-legged, crisscross applesauce around him, just sort of like a kindergarten teacher in all the class, just taking in whatever he's got to say. Hearing his word is the important thing. The description about Martha, the language that Luke uses, says that she is overoccupied. She is too busy about preparing and presenting food. That's what all of those words together mean. She is trying to be the consummate hostess. Sorry. She wants to be to offer wonderful hospitality to this very special teacher. She has been working all day. She's scurrying around trying to make things happen. I sort of imagine, frantic, hair on fire, trying to get everything just right, while her little sister is over there sitting, picking flowers and listening to Jesus talk. And I just assume that Martha is the older one because she's got more of the older tendencies than Mary does. The older child is typically the fixer, the one who tries to make everything right. And I think that when Jesus says that she is anxious, she's troubled, I don't know what translations you might have. The words are probably something sort of like that. But when I look at the language that Jesus uses, my translation would be freaking out. That's right. She needs to turn on some harp music and just be calm, have some tea or something. And she's just not really okay.
Yeah, she let life get in the way of, get in between her and Jesus.
I mean, I will not fault her for wanting to offer Jesus the very best experience that she can. That's what I would do. I would want to make sure that everything is just right. I wouldn't just, find some open package of bologna and some old stale chips from the pantry to throw at him. Now, I'd want it to be good. I get that. But the deal is, what she's about to offer is only temporary anyway, right?
But you all are speaking as men. And I have always felt Martha gets a bad rap. Well, like you said, hospitality was huge. It was her responsibility. How do you make a choice? I mean, it's hard from our position as women. I understand. I don't dispute what Jesus said, of course. He's the most important, but then, then what happens if the person that's responsible for the hospitality flakes out on it? They all go hungry.
Can I throw something in here?
Sure.
Nowhere in there does it condemn Martha for what she's doing. All he's saying is, don't take Mary away from me. Because Martha said, make her help me. And Jesus said, no, leave her, sit right where she is. She made a good choice. But nowhere does he say, you're doing the wrong thing. He says, just don't be bothered about all that stuff.
He tells her what she's doing isn't important.
That's my verbal anger.
I don't know. I don't know that I would exactly agree with that. I don't think he tells her that what she's doing isn't important or isn't necessary. What he does say to her is that this is not the most important thing at this moment. Trust me, Susan, I really
have to make that choice. That choice falls on us. You have a dinner party and invite an important guest, and who has to do it?
all I know, Susan, is that for the last multiple Thanksgivings and Christmases that I spend a couple of days in the kitchen cleaning and planning and preparing and cooking and doing all that kind of stuff. And I absolutely feel the pressure of it.
So how do you make a choice? Do you ignore taking care of your guests? I mean, how, because I just think that comes down, everybody says, don't be a Martha. Well, how do you make that choice?
Maybe it has to do more with the level of her, whatever the right word is, her anxiety or overwhelm or freak out is. Maybe she has really gone way beyond. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I look forward to seeing the replays of these in heaven. To get some understanding, like, so was Martha, doodling in the sand and off in La La Land, just kind of loving being close to Jesus, while Martha really is having an absolute nuclear meltdown about all this, or is a lot more calm than that? Because I think that probably makes a little bit of a difference. I don't think that Jesus is condemning Martha because of what he's talked about hospitality in the last couple of chapters. I don't think that he's condemning her for wanting to take care of the guests. I think the way that it makes the most sense to me is that she has gone way beyond. I don't know if you've ever been invited to somebody's house for a meal where they have just gone like bananas. It's possible that I know at least one woman who, even in just inviting her own family over, it makes sure that it's, the lace tablecloth and the napkins are ironed and folded with the napkin rings and everything matches and everything is in the perfect serving bowl, like,
That was.
That sounds like an office.
hey, it's just us. It's really just us. You're wearing yourself out to do this thing, which is lovely, but we'd much rather just spend time with you.
And I totally get that. I'm not disagreeing. But I just think Martha gets a bad rap. It was cultural. She was doing what was expected in that culture.
Yeah, and he's telling her it's okay not to.
I have something below the line here. I don't usually go there, but.
Be careful, Cody.
Below the line says,
Only one thing is necessary. One simple dish for the meal is all that is necessary, rather than the elaborate preparations.
Oh. wow, I had not ever even gone there.
So don't channel your Martha Stewart then.
Huh? Only one thing is necessary.
Throw away the cultural expectations.
You know, noodles, chicken and mushroom soup and a casserole is really all we need. We don't need all this other stuff. Interesting. I'll have to marinate on that for a while.
But still, like, this whole passage is he's saying, don't take Mary away. She made a choice. Don't make her leave. Don't make her change her mind.
And I get
He's not condemning. I don't see any chastising of Martha at all.
I absolutely believe that if I go to Martha's house, I'm gonna have a fabulous experience. It will be just right. And it'll probably be, well, it'll be just right and then some. It'll be over the top. And I really believe that what Jesus is trying to help her see, especially because if this really does fall within the last few weeks of his life, which as I read through the gospel, we're getting close to the end, that she is so worried about having this meal just right when he's not going to be around for much longer. And sitting and listening to Jesus to get words that she's not going to be able to get later is really the key. It's not exactly the same thing, but when I go back to Indiana to spend time with family, I just want to kind of sit around the table or sit on the couch and talk. I don't need a bunch of fancy dinners and a lot of extra special attention. I'm there to spend time with them. And it seems like that's really the key here. Looking ahead to the future, there's not a lot of time left. And I suppose it is probably sort of a loving thing for Jesus to say, I don't want you to, in a few weeks, to look back on this and say, why did I waste all that time ironing and folding the napkins when I could have been hanging out with Jesus and listening to his voice? Because I'm not going to hear it again. What do you think?
true. I haven't thought of it that way. But somebody still has to do the stuff so you can even sit around and talk.
Maybe.
Unless if you
I mean-
only need one thing, it wouldn't take very long.
If that's how that's.
it is true that Jesus has fed lots more people with lots smaller stuff. Maybe she's missed out on the opportunity to have Jesus do something miraculous. I don't know. I think it probably has to be about the scope of it. It's just so much.
That's true, and I think I've heard this a whole lot of times over like 50+ years, and it always seems to be just coming down. It's more, I've always read it more from a cultural perspective.
I don't think Jesus is going, Martha, Martha, hey! I think this is arm around the shoulder, sweet, soft Martha, Martha, baby, come on. You know this is crazy. Just
I'm sure you're right.
come and sit down here. I never had a meal with my grandmother sitting at the table.
Yeah.
And grandpa would be sitting at the table, whatever grandkids were there would be sitting at the table eating, and grandma is still all over the place, cooking more of this, finding more of that, filling cups and all of this. Like at one point after grandpa died, I said, Grandma, I did not come here to have you feed me. I came here to see you. Please sit down and eat with me. Man, that made her uncomfortable.
Cause that's not, yeah.
But that doesn't mean it was right. That doesn't mean it was right, though. I've heard that excuse before. That's just how we were raised, or that's just not how we were raised. Like, okay, well, I understand that. But
About the Thanksgiving preparations.
no,
His family would starve.
if Jesus shows up, I will.
Let's be nice. And order it.
Did any of you read the article in the newsletter this week?
It just.
I did, but I don't remember it. It's,
This is hot stuff.
I read, yeah. I don't remember it.
It was about getting ready for churches. It was very good.
And it was a little ironic. But anyway, I have heard the same kind of sermon and lessons, Susan, where poor sweet stupid Martha just gets beat up. And I don't feel like that's really probably very fair. She's trying to do a good thing. But she is, what did I write down here? I write a lot of stuff. Taking care of Jesus's temporary needs overruled her ability to listen to Jesus's temporally and eternally important words. It's good to eat, but the reality is that everyone who eats will need to eat again in a bit. The words that Jesus speaks to Mary and Martha and the disciples won't go away. Mary will have more of Jesus's words tucked away in her head and her heart. If I have to take something away from this exchange, I think it's something along the lines of that we need to be occupied with what lasts. And if we have to be anxious about anything, to be anxious to take in the words of Jesus.
Well, this helps me. I have a family dinner once a month, and my kids come from Heber City and Evanston, and most of the time I'm in the kitchen and they're all out, enjoying one another. And it's like, okay, I need to change this. and figure out
Let's order pizza.
a way that you can be with them.
Yeah.
And be
Have
less in
them
the
bring
kitchen.
food that you bring some.
Stop and pick up some KFC on your way to my house. Or a box of tacos or, whatever.
I get a cross reference to First Corinthians. Chapter 7. About being anxious. I don't know if you want to read that or not.
Well, I don't know.
I had it pulled up and now I can't find it.
All I know about 1 Corinthians 7 is it is good for a man not to be married, but it's better to marry than to burn. That's
Well.
what I
says the
learned in
unmarried man
college.
is anxious about things of the Lord, the married man is anxious about worldly things. And the unmarried woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, but the married woman is anxious about worldly things and how to please her husband. Does it mean Martha was married?
I don't, it never says either Mary or Martha is. Doesn't.
Not in either place, not here in Luke or over in John. It doesn't mention anything about that. We don't really even know how old they were. Are these, are Mary, Martha, and Lazarus like, in their 20s and 30s? Are they old spinsters? There's not really any. Yeah. The fact that they're so wrapped up and decimated by his death would maybe indicate to me that they're all younger and really close, used to taking care of each other.
They didn't have anybody to take care
Exactly. If the guy dies, the girls are up a creek in that culture. Well, okay. That was awesome.
Not one of that.
Really, really, truly. That's great. Okay, so the next thing in Luke's gospel, so from Luke 11, verse 1 down through Luke 11:36, it's a collection of passages that we have already covered earlier in the study. Some of them are during the Sermon on the Mount or in some other circumstances. But you can find these same pieces in different places in Matthew's gospel, in Matthew 6, Matthew 7, Matthew 12, and some of it in Mark chapter 3. So that is plowed ground. We already have totally covered those passages to our satisfaction. So we're not going to hit that again. We're going to go down to verse 37. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash before the meal. Then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." How about that? So again, Jesus is having a meal with somebody. In the last paragraph, like, come and spend some time with me. Here it's like, I'm pretty sure the Pharisee is wishing he had not spent any time with Jesus at all, because he ends up being the object lesson for everyone. I will say that the one thing that I noticed when I was getting this part ready is that the Pharisee doesn't ever even say a word. what is it? He noticed, or he took notice that Jesus didn't wash before the meal. I believe that's this look.
Mine says surprised.
Mine says marveled.
Wow. So
That
he's
was their focus.
he's astonished by it. But again, we don't have any record of any words. Jesus just can tell that this Pharisee has got a real big issue with it. Marveling, being amazed, being surprised, being aghast. I mean, I don't know. There's lots of stuff that could be there. Jesus always takes issues with the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders because they're more concerned about image and optics. That's the word we would use today. Much more concerned about those things than they are about character and righteousness. Just always. That's what every confrontation between Jesus and the Pharisees and scribes boils down to. You all are so concerned about outward appearances. You have given no thought to what's on the inside. And so he puts it in the context of this washing the cup and the bowl thing. Who would wash the outside of a cereal bowl but leave the inside full of crud and crust before they filled it with cereal or soup or ice cream? Okay. If anybody from Francisville ever happens to watch this, I'm making this story up. So I had very good friends in my first ministry. Very good people, very generous, very helpful. I loved them dearly. And occasionally they would invite me to come over to their house for a meal. And so it was, husband and wife and a couple of kids. And so when the meal was over, they would take some of the dishes to the kitchen, but some of the dishes they would just put down on the floor for the cats and the dog to come and to finish. And the first time I saw that, I kind of got a little yigged out. Like, I don't know if I can come back here again, because that's something. I realized that they were going to then wash those things by hand, that they would be scrubbed, that they would be washed and dried. But I can put Snowflake's bowl into this passage right here. Like if you got one bowl and you're feeding all of your creatures in it, I'm not just going to wash the outside. That is not going to be enough. I want to make sure that everything is washed out. Everything is clean. The preacher at Francisville used to tell this story that they would go to his dad's house in Tennessee. His dad was a nuclear physicist, worked at Oak Ridge, brilliant guy, brilliant mind. But he was living alone. His wife had died several years before, and all the family would go down and they'd have a meal. And again, they were having their kids clean the plates up, and they started doing that. And the grandfather's like, don't stack the plates, because that way I have to wash both sides. Don't stack them. Anyway, I think both of those stories fit in really nicely here. Jesus wants to point out that the whole thing has got to be clean. It's all got to be washed, not just the part that can be seen by somebody else. And that's his summation of these leaders. They're really pretty and clean, sparkly and shiny on the outside, but on the inside, where it matters, they're just gross. If you're already gross on the inside, doesn't really matter if you wash your hands. Specifically, their lack of concern for the poor, which I'm going to assume would cover almost everybody else at the time. That's their biggest failure. If they would just consider the needs of others and do something to meet those needs, then Jesus says they would be clean. They wouldn't have crusty, cruddy, yucky parts on the inside. It's their love of favoritism and privilege that is so deadly to them. Any thoughts about any of that? I don't know why Jesus doesn't want to wash his hands. I guess as the creator of all things, it probably doesn't really make too much of a difference to him. He's made it all.
Yeah, intent to delve into that whole.
To use it, here's his object lesson for the day. It could be.
Kind of poking the Pharisees. So this is like, okay, I'll go over there and just, I'm not wash my hands and see what happens.
And I think in the next piece, we'll come back around to the idea. I think that it is not out of hatred or whatever for the Pharisees. I just think that he wants to knock them out of this rut. Gentlemen, you've got to think about this in a different way. I'm telling you these things not to just be mean and hurt your feelings. I want you to change. So
They lived by the letter of the law, most of which they had added on top
right.
of the original law.
Right.
And that seems to be what he is always bumping up against with them. Not God's intent, not the spirit of the law, but their little nitpicky grind people down with all your.
Which is what he gets to in the next passage. That's a beautiful segue. I couldn't have written any better, Susan. Let's roll on there. Verse 42. What follows in verses 42 down through 54 is a long declaration of woe on the Pharisees. Luke presents them in one long speech. Matthew in his gospel has these curses kind of scattered through various places. I would remind you, I think we talked about this before. Maybe when Jesus was talking about the woes on Chorazin and Bethsaida, a couple chapters ago, that the word that's used that's translated woe is all vowels. It is O-U-A-I. So it's like it's mostly just a noise, a sound of grief. I don't know if you can make O-U-A-I into a sound, but it seems like that would be something like why kind of a thing. And I said, that's sadness. And I have always seen these words that Jesus gives to the Pharisees, these woes, always seen them as being sort of harsh and kind of like passionless. There's just this angry smackdown. And I think if we know what that word is and what that word means, I think we come at it with a different kind of delivery. It's not so much this angry, frustrated, corrective rebuke. I think it comes a little deeper. It's not just condemnation of bad attitude and behavior. I feel like there is some sadness in these words. So
And that anger kind of approach won't really change mine, that'll just.
No.
That'll just put up barriers.
when there are already plenty of those in place. I guess we should read the text before we just kind of summarize it. Woe to you Pharisees, verse 42. Woe to you Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Woe to you Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves which people walk over without knowing it. One of the experts in the law answered him, Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also. Jesus replied, And you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. There you go, Susan, right there. Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, and others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. Okay, so the first half is leveled at the Pharisees. The last half is aimed at the experts in the law. The scribes, I mean, these are the leaders of the people. The Pharisees and the scribes, the teachers of the law, they make up the great council, they make up the Sanhedrin. They're important people. Lots of responsibility, lots of authority. And Jesus just kind of points out what is obvious to him. First, they are faithful tithers. And he includes everything. I mean, down to the herbs and spices in the cabinet. They'll measure out a tenth of that to give to God. They want to be so precise about that. But the thing that really matters the most, their desire to provide justice for the people, their compassion for those who are in great need, their love of God, their love for God, just is non-existent. They're doing so much to be so very careful, executing the absolute perfect letter of the law, that they've missed out on the things that those laws were written upon. Mercy and love for God. They are prideful lovers of attention and respect. They want everybody to see them. They want everybody to notice them. They want everybody to go, oh my, look at that man. Such a good man, such a faithful Jew, such an example to all of us. Come and sit here, come to my house, sit at the best table. And again, they're so concerned about the privilege and favoritism that they lose sight of the people that they're there to lead and to care for. And the third one is that they are hidden corruptors of the people. So to come in contact with a dead body was to make yourself unclean. I cannot say for sure, I did not look this up, but it would seem like it is also not ideal for a Jew to walk over a grave site. The point seems to be that Jesus says that what you're doing is a minefield for the rest of the people. They just follow you and they can't see how badly mistaken you are. And so you bring them along into the same kind of error. You're unclean, you're dead on the inside. And what you're doing has the rest of the people following in those same footsteps. And so, one of them pipes up and says, "Excuse me, Jesus, what you're saying really hurts my feelings." Their pride is being stomped on. Their feelings are hurt. They take offense to his words, as people who are being corrected typically do. Please continue to tell me how badly I'm screwing this up. I'm having a great time. Yeah, you're hurting my feelings. Exactly.
Turns and points the rest of it right at them.
Yeah. Oh, you think your feelings are hurt now? Hang on just a second. They are pushers of the heavy burden of the law. They just keep throwing more and more burden on the people. It's hard enough to follow 10 commands, let alone 610 commands, which they had more than that. I forget the exact number, like 621 or something like that. Ridiculous. I mean, how do you ever keep track of all that?
And it's contradictory too. If you were following one, you were violating
Yeah.
the other.
So Jesus points to these experts in the law who should know that the whole basis of the law is to show your love for God and to treat your neighbor lovingly. And that's lost. There's no mercy, there is no grace, there is no compassion, there is no assistance. It's all cut and dried. You must do this, book, chapter, and verse. Do it right now, or you are guilty of sin against God. The one that's a little trickier is that these experts in the law are, and I didn't know a better way to write it, than they're admirers of the prophets, they say, but they are also admirers of their ancestors, who are the very ones who silenced the prophets by killing them. So this part of the woe is a little longer. He goes into a little more detail about building monuments to the prophets, and God said he would send them prophets and apostles. They would kill some, they would persecute others. And this generation is going to be guilty for the death of all the prophets who were killed up to that time. Well, that kind of seems wrong. I thought I could only be responsible for my own sin. Here's my read. We would understand that all of the prophets in the Old Testament are speaking for God, and they are all pointing towards the coming Messiah, the coming King, the one who would sit on David's throne, It's all about how God's kingdom is going to come take place on earth. And they killed him. Prophet after prophet died because the king or the leaders of the people or the priests or somebody didn't want to hear that message anymore. So if all of the messages that have been delivered by a prophet are all pointing at the coming Messiah, when the Messiah arrives and they reject the Messiah, they're rejecting all of those things that were ever said. And that's why they would be guilty of it. If they can't accept Jesus, they wouldn't have. If there's all this prophecy about Jesus, about how he will be, and when he arrives, he does all those things. If they are incapable of understanding who he is, then there's no way they would have accepted the message of those prophets, and they would have been the killers of them just as well. So, and the last woe is that they are removers of the key to knowledge. They have rejected Jesus as the Messiah, and it's not enough that they have just rejected him themselves, but they are also trying to keep the rest of the people away from that same truth. They don't want anybody to accept that Jesus is the Messiah. So they're guilty of locking the door and throwing away the key so nobody else can get to him as well. These men may be seen by their community as being good men, but their selfishness, their lack of compassion, their rejection of God's truth reveals their real level of goodness. They are not good men. They're just selfish. And as you would expect, this barrage that Jesus unloads on them sets them against him like never before. They are enraged. And so they start throwing all kinds of questions at Jesus. They pick up all of the things that they have heard that he has said or that they themselves have heard him say, and they start doing like the press conference with him. Just bang, 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 question after question, rapid fire. They're just hoping that he's going to give the wrong answer. And they go, see, exactly. He is a fraud. He is a faker. He is no Messiah. That's what they want. They want to trap him in front of everybody so they can be done with him for good. And they're not able to do it. Questions or big thoughts about any of that? It's really loaded.
Well, I mean, there's just a lot in there to think about. It's my mind racing. So in current day Judaism, is there a group similar to the Pharisees still that exists?
Yeah, there are various sects of Jews today. When we visited in Jerusalem, there's people who are dressed just like me and you and kind of just wandering around. And then there are some people that are in long black coats and little black bowlers, and they're another group. And then there are the guys who are wearing the big, thick, heavy coats and the big fur hat on their head and have the long curly this and that. And they've got about, January the 14th kind of clothes on in the middle of the summer. And they are, it seems like the dress code sort of indicates how tight they are with, yeah. There are still groups that are extremely devout, extremely committed to all of those laws. And there are some who just, they're mostly just Jewish in heritage. And they might light some candles at Hanukkah, but that's about it.
The first group, that's what's considered Orthodox, correct? The group that's committed to everything.
Then there's probably some sort of ultra Orthodox. There's probably a specific name for that group. I don't know it. I just know that we saw when we went to the Western Wall. You have such a mix of all kinds of people, and like, man, that is a big burly dude with a great big heavy beard, and he is wrapped up like he lives in Siberia, and I would just be a puddle on the ground. That is so much. Man.
Orthodoxy on steroids.
Okay. Well, how about we just stick a fork in it right there at Luke 12. We'll pick up there next time. I will also remind you that I'm going to be away in a few weeks, probably the last Thursday in March and the first Thursday in April. My family will be out of town together, so we won't meet then, but we'll.
Spring break.
Yes.
Nice. Good for you.
We're going with Joan on a big trip, so
You're taking Joan.
Be
on a
exciting.
trip?
yep,
She didn't come today. She's too tired from yesterday.
I guess. All right, well, I'm gonna turn off the recording. It's been great to have you here. I don't like the way these glasses make my eyes look in this recording. It looks like Chris Christopherson. Oh, you love that.